there! Welcome back to the Learn Talk training program.
Today, it's all about how to give feedback effectively and how to correct your students during your lesson.
It's important to know how much correction goes into each phase of the lesson.
Direct. This is the phase where you want to correct the most. Try to catch as many pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary mistakes. Remember, this is the phase where they are learning the language, so it's essential for you to focus on accuracy.
Rehearse. This is the phase where you want to engage your student and encourage them to experiment with the language in an open-ended discussion. There is less error correction here.
That means avoid interrupting and correcting immediately after they've made a mistake. You'll still need to correct mistakes that are repeated and the ones that are very obvious. But if there is a pronunciation slip that happens, jot it down and bring it up as a feedback point before moving on to the next phase.
Let's take a look at how to handle correcting most pronunciation and grammar errors. Remember, the goal of effective error correction is to help your students self-correct for better retention. There are two techniques we use for this. Technique number 1, repeat up to the word.
My friend have 2 cars.
My friend.
My friend has 2 cars.
Technique number 2, finger count.
My friend have 2 cars.
My friend.
My friend has 2 cars.
Notice how the teacher used facial expressions and body language to indicate there was something wrong. That's the best way to get your student to stop and realize there was an error. Interrupting directly should be the very last resort.
Let's take a look now at another technique that we can use to correct mistakes without causing too much distraction. This one's called the follow-up.
I have went to Canada before.
I have been to the US before. What about you?
Yes.
Have you been to Canada before?
Yes. I have been to Canada before.
This one is best used with grammar errors like tenses, subject-verb agreement, conditionals, and overall syntax issues. Give it a shot because it's one of our most fluid correcting techniques.
Another technique that is helpful is called the OR question. It works by allowing the student to choose on their own which is the correct answer. Say your student makes a mistake. You should immediately ask a question that contains the mistake followed by an OR and the correct answer. Let's take a look at this one in action.
My brother is a good cook. She cooks good burgers.
Does your brother or your sister cook good burgers?
He cooks good burgers. Sorry, he cooks good burgers.
The last technique we'll cover that should be used during the direct and rehearse stages is called the switch up. Here, you simply ask a question containing the correct word and get your student to respond to using it. Let's take a look.
I sat at my seat.
Did you sit on your seat?
I sat on my seat.
Good job. You sat on your seat.
All of these techniques should only be used to correct errors during the beginning of your lesson.
Now let's focus on some other ways to correct your students that involve using body language. Notice how earlier the student picked up something was wrong? That's because the teacher used facial expressions and hand gestures to communicate there was a mistake. This is more effective than saying stop or oops, since it doesn't distract as much. Here are a couple of mistakes you can use body language to correct.
Singular noun errors. You can hold up one finger to indicate that the word they made a mistake on should be singular.
Plural noun errors. You can trace an S through the air after they made a mistake to indicate that it should be plural.
Past tense. Move your hand like this to indicate that they've made a mistake in the wrong tense.
Prepositions. Use your hands to indicate which one. On, at, in, etc.
Okay, Bianca, so that's about it for the techniques we use to correct during direct and rehearse phases. Let's take a look now at how to correct during the last phase of the lesson. Showtime. Remember, our goal for this phase is to get your student to master the language and conversation. That means we're focused on fluency. Interrupting and correcting your student while they're acting is to be avoided at all costs. That's because we don't want them to get discouraged and distracted while they're trying to piece together the conversation and use the new language on their own. Jot down comments on a notebook and correct them afterwards.
You also want to provide your students with constructive feedback. Have you ever heard of the sandwich method before? This means you should highlight certain words or phrases they use correctly, then comment on areas they need to improve on, then bring up another positive comment about their performance. Think of this like a sandwich. Positive, negative, positive.
Also, remember that we're trying to encourage self-correction. So the first thing you need to ask is, how did you think you did? They'll give themselves a rating and you can then go into your feedback of their performance. Let's take a look at the demonstration.
Lastly, always be considerate of your students when correcting their mistakes. If it's obvious they need more time, don't enter into the habit of correcting them too quickly. Give them time to answer before moving in.
Sometimes a student will make a mistake while using language that is not the target language of the lesson. If it is during the direct and rehearsed part of the lesson, correct the mistake immediately and quickly move on to the next prompt question. Spending too much time correcting errors that are not the target language of the lesson can distract and confuse the student. Our overall goal is to correct quickly and then move on with the lesson.
Well, that wraps it up for our session on correction techniques and giving feedback.